Well, first, my good afternoon. It's Thursday. This is Manx Radio's Mannin Line. Beth looking after things again for Andy today. He's on holiday. He'll be back next week. Another open line, so we would love to talk to you about anything on your mind this lunchtime. We've heard an MHK hit out at Manx Care on Manx Radio this morning, claiming it's broken and not working for our island. What do you make of Julie Edge's comments? A meeting's taking place today between the Public Services Commission and Unite the Union to talk public sector pay. Are essential workers being left behind? And have you seen the lovely news about that new hut for sea swimmers in Ramsey? Perhaps you'd like to talk about something positive this afternoon. Whatever it is, we'd love to talk to you. 66 13 68 is the number. Howard is waiting to take your call. You can also text us 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. If you add us to your contacts in WhatsApp, you can message us for free. 07624 166 177 is the number. I just want to start the programme, though, with something of an apology because I was talking to a caller who phoned in to yesterday's programme, and she was quite upset at some of the comments we read out after she was on air. And I think it's just made me think we need to be a little bit mindful. Sometimes we don't get a chance to pre-read some of the messages that come in, but I do really appreciate people who especially take the time to phone in and raise issues that they think need to be addressed. And so if any of the comments that are then read out are taken as an offensive comment towards them, that is not the intention at all. So I will be a little bit more mindful about the comments that we read out. And as I say, we do welcome people taking the time to call today's programme. Juan has been in touch just to talk about doctors. He says some doctors' practices are paying their staff the minimum wage. This is unfair. And a message here from texter ending 980 that says, I agree with Debbie Holsall about a sliding scale for the PSC pay dispute where the low to middle earners would get more than the top earners. But when the people around the negotiation table on the PSC side are the top earners, it's not going to happen. It would be interesting to know what salary they are on. Might hear more from Debbie Halsall in just a moment. But I did mention the Onken MHK, who is calling for a complete forensic review of Manx Care and its spending. While doctors plan to stage 2 days of industrial action next week, Julie Edge says she's never known the island to take so long with negotiations. It's part of an ongoing row over pay and Manx Care. Manx Care says steps are being taken to minimise disruption. But Ms Edge says the Minister for Health should be available to provide assurances.
The most important thing for our island is to have a good health service and to ensure that our doctors are paid appropriately and accordingly. And this should have been sorted before it got to this. And I know people will say, well, you've been involved in strike action at the post office, strike action with teachers. I don't believe the same amount of negotiation and communication and collaboration with our doctors has taken place.
We've invited Manx Care. We also invited the Chief Minister, Alfred Cannon, to join us. He deferred to the Health and Social Care Minister, that's Claire Christian, but she declined the interview opportunity whilst negotiations continue. Do you think the Manx public need to hear from those at the top much more quickly on this?
I can understand whilst negotiations are ongoing that could be the case. And actually, this is why in a way that the ministers should not be directly involved in those negotiations. I do believe that we should have got independent negotiation like I did for education. The new minister probably hasn't had that opportunity or chance because it's been going on for such a significant length of time. She probably hasn't had that opportunity. I can't obviously speak for them as to why they're not, but if you're in dispute, it is difficult. But there's things you can say to reassure our public, and I think that's the lack I'm seeing in this current government and from the Chief Minister.
You say that Manx Care is broken without doctors, and it's time it was restructured as it's not working for the island. What do you think a restructure should look like?
Right at the outset of the Sir Jonathan Michael report, and that's an old hat now in my mind, really. It's not worked for the island, but I said it should have been a full statutory board model where the Manx Care had control of everything, and then you can hold managers and the chief officers to account. However, I think the one thing that we really do need to do with Manx Care is a complete forensic review of where the Manx taxpayers' money is going. It's virtually doubled since the Sir Jonathan Michael, and I know that was a recommendation, but it seems to have affected our services, and that's key for me. It's the services that have been impacted for the public of the Isle of Man. They seem to be they are getting worse. I've had written answers recently about the numbers through A&E, and I've had to challenge virtually every question I've had. And then it comes back with a different answer because I've had background knowledge, and to not even be getting the correct answers out from Manx Care, I think it proves, are they actually aware of what the Manx public had as a service prior to Manx Care? And I don't think they are.
That is Onken MHK Julie Edge. She was talking live to Ben on Breakfast this morning. As Ben mentioned, we have asked a number of people for interview about this. Getting the balance is crucial. We know that. So we ask if we can speak to people. But so far, the DHSC Minister, Claire Christian, as we heard, has declined an interview because those negotiations, she says, are continuing. The Chief Minister said it would be for the Health Minister to speak. We were hoping to speak to the Manx Care CEO today. But again, because those negotiations are ongoing, they don't feel it's an appropriate time to talk at the moment, but those invitations for interviews are open and will remain so. Manx Care says most non-urgent services will be paused while doctors strike next week. That's the 22nd and 23rd of January. They add they want to reassure the community that operational planning is underway to minimise the impact on patients and service users. The Department of Health and Social Care says it respects the right of the workforce to take action. Let's go to the lines though now, and we can join Robert. Good afternoon, Robert.
Hi, how you doing? I'm just talking about housing on the Isle of Man, social housing and homelessness.
Okay.
You've got people coming out of prison at the moment and they've got literally no prospectus of getting accommodation, and they're just being put out on the streets. Yeah, they're taking the low-risk prisoners out in Chmode and putting the high-risk prisoners, give them out.
Okay, so this sounds like something we'd need to speak to the department about. I mean, what would be the best thing, in your opinion, to happen then, Robert?
Well, they've got workers that are working on it, but I mean, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any social housing coming alongside things. I think that the prison service need to work far better with local housing. As I said, you've got people who've got points on the system and they're ratcheting them up and they're getting there, but there just doesn't seem to be any provision for social housing in general on the Isle of Man. There doesn't seem to be any will of Tynwald whatsoever to make any joy in terms of social housing. There doesn't seem to be any want for it. There doesn't seem to be any will for it, and I just think it's appalling.
And Robert, is this something that you have or would consider raising with your MHK, your local representatives?
They already know. They're just ashamed to admit it.
And is this something that you know from either experience or a friend's experience is having a real impact?
I'm down at Grier at the moment, right, and you've got people wandering around who go to around town and they end up at Grier and people like that, and literally they've got nowhere to go. There's nothing, it's not the nothing to do argument, but I mean, they've literally got nowhere to rest their head. So, you've got the place downtown on the prom, which was the hotel which they put them all in, or they put people in to accommodate them throughout winter. Well, they're all going into old people's homes now and people like that to accommodate them there. So, it's kind of a scattergun approach, whereas we really should have a proper policy in place to get people on the social housing ladder.
All right, Robert, I think you've raised a really important issue there. We really appreciate you phoning in. Leave it with us.
Anytime.
We will ask the powers that be and let's see what we can find out about this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Robert there talking about social housing need here on the Isle of Man. Some text messages just regarding the doctor strike next week. Ian says, let them go on strike. The service is abysmal. It can't get much worse. Interestingly, I was talking to somebody off the after the programme yesterday, and I just wonder sometimes, is it if you're not directly affected maybe yourself, if you haven't experienced positive treatment, if you haven't had need to go and be treated by one of the doctors, then perhaps you're not seeing the full story, and perhaps it's those people who have been under the care of the very many good doctors over here on the Isle of Man who see it in a more positive light. Neil in Douglas says some doctors are on 100,000, 200,000, a few on £500,000. Do they really need to go on strike? It sounds like pure greed. Gary has been in touch to say an acquaintance has apparently received a Manx Telecom letter about the upcoming installation of fibre in their area and the installation costs they will be expected to pay. A couple of points come to mind. Didn't government give Manx Telecom some money to roll out fibre? Also, my card payments are being phased out in favour of payments into a bank account while bank branches are closing down, so online banking and other online services will increasingly become a necessity, not a choice, and charging people on the back of a government-supported initiative seems to be an unwarranted imposition. We do have an interview with Gary Lamb from Manx Telecom. If you can go to the Manx Radio website, there's a Manx newscast there, so you'll be able to hear in detail them talk about this rollout of fibre and the expected turning off of the copper network by 2029. And a message from Daphne to say ditch Manx Care and bring back the way we treated people's health before Manx Care was introduced. That was when we could get appointments, etc. Waiting for weeks and in many cases months for a procedure rarely happened 30 years ago. I wonder, Daphne, again, just trying to play devil's advocate, is that because there were maybe fewer of the procedures available? Maybe there are more sort of procedures that are routinely available now, fewer people, I don't know. Roy says we need less social housing, not more. Why should the majority subsidise the minority that demand these hands out? The world doesn't owe you anything. Get out working and stop expecting things. I think, again, to be fair there, Roy, I think we're talking about a very specific situation where people find it really difficult. You know, if they've come out and don't have anywhere to go, that must be incredibly disheartening. Susan says people that phone in offering their opinion shouldn't cry foul when people reply. It's called being a grown-up. Nobody should take offence at anything. It's just people's opinion. Opinions count and shouldn't be vetted for people. Don't vet this show for the feelings of the emotionally unintelligent. Take your point there, Susan. Again, we talked yesterday about the fact that we don't typically vet comments unless there's anything that would particularly be unwise for us to read out on air. But I do think it's fair that if somebody phones in about something and then hears comments which feel that they are personally directed at them, that maybe, you know, that's on us to be a little bit more mindful about what we read out. Des says, you don't have to read this out. I don't want to offend anyone. Thank you, Des. There are people on the housing list for years with families. Why should people coming out of jail get a council commissioner's house straight away if they have been in prison? But I suppose, again, James, the point is that people have served their sentence and done their time. So what is there maybe, if we listen to what Robert was saying, to encourage people then to sort of start on their new life and try and get things together? Big John in Ramsey says Ramsey Beach now has a beach hut for the sea swimmers, which I'm all in favour of. But on the same hand, is it too much for that small beach in front of the lifeboat, which most people use, to be cleaned once a week? That is a fair beach. We talked about this before. I think, was it Wilf who phoned in, was it last week, talking about this? And it is something that's on our radar to ask about. Thank you very much indeed. Sue says, why don't our schools have the same system as the UK regarding schools? If your first choice is full, then you have to go to another option. Schools near new housing estates can't just keep taking in new children if they haven't got the space. A school which was built as a village school doesn't have the space for 2 classes in the same year, so overflow children are being squeezed into other spaces, not with the main class, and they possibly haven't got enough teachers to cover this. This will get worse, says Sue, as reception class numbers increase, but space doesn't. Something needs to be done instead of ignoring it. Thank you very much indeed, Sue. Let's go to the lines and join Alan now. Good afternoon, Alan. Oh, you might have to turn your radio down, I think. Ooh. Oh, Alan, you sound like a Dalek. Oh, hang on. Are you there now? Oh, Alan, I can't hear you at all. Do you know what? I might see if Howard can give you a call back and see if we can improve that line, because, we weren't hearing very much at all then. Sorry about that. Hopefully we'll come to Alan, who I understand wanted to talk about doctors in just a moment. A message from George, just to add to the service closures, overspends and waiting lists. Now the doctors are walking out. This is another success tally up to Manx Care. When will our government finally realise that the Jonathan Michael report has been a total abject failure? Roger says the issue with those coming out of prison when they get a property is sometimes they slip back into their old ways. From Roger's experience as a property manager, it can cost thousands of pounds to sort out if there's any damage to the property. Therefore, a halfway house is needed with support to help people back into work and then their own accommodation. People declining to speak on Manx Radio because they're running scared, says texter 376. I have all the empathy in the world for the nurses when they want to take industrial action, says Grumpy Bob. They wash people's bums, they watch them die, they do the general jobs. Doctors, on the other hand, swan around nobles with an air of superiority, says Grumpy Bob, and most of them do not have a great bedside manner. You never see the same person twice. They rarely get their hands dirty or have to cope with the day-to-day of the wards. This is just greed. But again, maybe Grumpy Bob, maybe that goes back to the idea that yesterday we were talking about, I'm sure somebody texted in saying, you know, what you're paying for is all those years of training and all those years of experience. Let's see if we can get Alan back on now. Alan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello. I can hear you now.
Yeah. What it is the Alman government knew that once Labour comes into power, that they were going to settle with the doctors for their pay and as well as the nurses. So my view is the Alman government have got to settle now with the doctors. They've got to pay them what they're deserved.
So I suppose the question is, Alan, though, what gives in these financially difficult times? Where does that money come from? There are going to surely have to be services that are impacted if you are going to pay what the doctors are asking for.
Well, not being funny, but the Alman government's been wasting a lot of money for years since they've been in power. So, you know, maybe get rid of a few of them. But I do think the doctors deserve a better pay. But I mean, I've been to Snowball a few times. I've got very much respect for the doctors and nurses up there. And I mean, the nurses should be getting a better pay deal too. So, you know, these people, you know, even under COVID, we're under so much stresses. We all clap for them. Now that they want a pay rise, they don't want to do it. So they knew Labour was going to settle. The Labour government settled. The Isle of Man must follow suit. They've got to settle this now. There's no messing about. Fix it. Or doctors are going to leave this island if they don't get their pay deals. And we're going to end up paying a lot more to get bank doctors over here. So work that one out. That's going to be a lot of money.
All right, Alan, so you'd be happy to see that 12.6% given to the doctors, and as you say, from your own personal experience, they deserve it.
You think what is cheaper, paying them that money or end up paying treble for bank doctors to come to the Isle of Man for 3 months? What makes more sense?
All right, Alan.
I would pay them the deal, give them the deal.
Thank you so much for taking the time to call, Alan.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. That is Alan talking about the doctors, this impending strike that we've got coming up next Wednesday to early Friday morning. Alan says pay the doctors what they're asking for because they are worth it. The only solution, says James, is for Manx Care to be scrapped and the health service to go back to what it was before Jonathan Michaels wrote his report. Texter ending 123 says Manx Care can't pay the doctors if Treasury continues to underfund Manx Care. Some of the things Manx Care has been trying to introduce, drag healthcare into the 21st century, are badly needed. People say how nice everyone is. That doesn't equal quality care. Dare I suggest, says this texter, we should be spending more on sending more people across to be treated by experts, including experienced nursing and care staff, rather than trying to do it all ourselves here. The bottom line, says this texter, is our healthcare system needs to be properly funded. It's not Manx Care, it's the Manx government. It's almost impossible, says Donald, to establish phone contact with my GP surgery to either make an appointment or cancel or change an appointment. Every time I get through on the phone, the call drops out and the end result is to make a personal visit. And Donald thinks this is very poor. Wealthy comeovers should pay for their healthcare, says texter ending 553. But Robert says, when are people going to understand the Isle of Man government just doesn't have the money? And the former health minister left Manx Care in a proper mess when he stood down as Manx Care minister. He should have lost his position as MHK. As a default, his wages could have gone towards fixing his problem with doctors. Texter ending 980 says, I agree with Debbie Holsall about a sliding scale for the PSC pay dispute. 223 says, here's a prediction, and this is on the back of an interview that we had with Motivate on this morning's breakfast programme. Gambling is going to overtake drugs and alcohol as the number one problem for the under 30s. If we've got time, we'll listen to that interview with Thea Ozenturk. It looks like the private sector is going to have to shoulder more tax rises to pay for above inflation pay rises for those people in the public sector, says texter ending 404. Let's go to the lines and join Jill now. Good afternoon, Jill.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm phoning to complain about, not complain about the patients, but the patients that are having to go to Liverpool. There's hundreds of us going every day to Liverpool for an injection in our eye. It's called Eylea, this is the drug. It takes 10 minutes to get injected. We have to get the flight in the morning, which departs at 7 o'clock. But if we're picked up very early, and we have to hang around an airport all day, and the last plane at night is 7:35. Sometimes they cause an edema in the eye, and I believe we could get that injection on the island on a Friday for the wet eye. But if you're diabetic or another condition, you have to go off to Liverpool. So it's a simple operation. Well, it's not even an operation. It's an injection into the eye that could be done on the island, which is being done on a Friday to the wet eye patients.
So, Jill, I mean, that sounds like an awful lot to have to go through, bless you. But I suppose...
Yes, but 10 minutes of it, I think. Yeah. And then the nurses in Liverpool have had edema in the eye. They've caused a bleed in the eye. And I've had to sit with a sore eye in all day in Liverpool Airport. And it's shocking what they're doing on the Manx patients, having to go off the island. And as I say, I've come across different patients every time I've gone. So there must be hundreds going off in a week.
So, Jill, I guess, again, this is something that we would need to ask Manx Care about, to be completely fair. But I suppose with something like injections into the eye, that does sound quite specialist, and you want to be around a team, God forbid, if anything went wrong.
But it's the same drug. It's called Eylea. So it's the same drug. So I don't know what the problem is. They always say follow the money, but I don't know where that. I don't understand why they're sending the Manx patients off the island for this.
Okay, Jill, leave it with us. Okay. We will ask that question. Thank you so much, and take care.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
That was Jill talking about going off island for that injection into her eyes. Just gone 12:31.
Station, Manx Radio.
You're listening to the Mannin Line here on Manx Radio. It's just gone at 12:33. Let's join Julian now on line one. Good afternoon, Julian.
Hi, Beth. Very pleased to hear about the shelter for sea swimming at Ramsey. That's a great idea.
Oh, it really is. And if you'd like to see the video of it, it's lovely. There's so many people who have made that happen. It's a real community effort, and it's lovely. So well worth having a look if you're able to go to the Manx Radio Facebook page or our website. But yeah, it's nice to have some good news.
Yeah, no, it's great. Just before I just talk about net zero policy for the island, just a quick follow-up to yesterday. You asked me a few questions on behalf of anonymous texter 653. Sounds like it reminds me of an episode of The Prisoner. If you remember, Patrick McGowan used to play the character called Number 6. It would be nice to have a name, I suppose. The use of the word expat, I think they mentioned afterwards about my use of the word. expat. So, anonymous texter 653 might want to send some stern letters to some companies based in Spain, like expat.com, Expatica. Might want to write to Expat Legal Spain in Valencia. Sorry, Expat Legal Spain in Valencia. Address your letter to Sandra Marquez, who is making a living handling legal matters for expats, according to her website. Similarly, Expatra, the immigration lawyers Joana Torres Fernandez and Maria Luisa de Castro are waiting for anonymous texter 653's letter. I noticed actually on Spain Expat, which was founded in Seville, they state that non-EU expats need to apply for a non-lucrative residence visa, which requires criminal records, medical letters, evidence of economic means with a minimum of 25,560 euros available in their account, private insurance, and all of these documents must be apostillized and officially translated by official translators in the home country. And this visa will then allow you to get permanent residency after 5 years. So a few hoops to go through there, Beth.
Yes.
But I don't know. These Spanish people are using the word expat. I noticed that Expatia use it over 26 times on just one of their pages. So.
Yeah, the point I think Julian was talking more around the issues that you were raising. And I think it's fair, we talk about being as balanced as we possibly can be. So I take your point, and you've obviously done a lot of Googling yesterday afternoon. Was there something else you were going to talk about, net zero policy?
I noticed one of the sort of go-to things for investors is investornews.com. They just got a recent title to an article called The End of Net Zero Targets, and they're noticing that major banks are pulling out from net zero, including Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. They have all left the Net Zero Banking Alliance. BlackRock have left the Net Zero Asset Manager Initiative. Which is interesting. They're also making a note that global operating capacity for coal is increased at a whopping 2% just in 2023. And I don't know if you noticed, the AfD party in Germany that seems to be up and coming at the moment, they seem to have won some elections, the Alternative for Deutschland. I noticed the leader, Alice Weidel, quoting from what she said, she wants to lift bans on internal combustion engines and oil and gas heating systems, wants to do away with CO2 tax, massively reduce energy taxes, end the energy transition, exit the EU climate policy, longer operating allowance times for coal power stations, which she says are the cleanest and most modern coal power plants in the world, and reinstate the Nord Stream Russian gas pipelines that were blown up, if you remember. And she said all this and then raised her fist and said, you can rely on that. Now, bearing in mind that Germany is, well, if you take Belgium as the paperwork centre of Europe, Germany is really the powerhouse, the economic powerhouse. So if the politics change to that, that's going to be a very, very big difference, especially considering what's going on in America on Monday. The whole idea of blowing at least £40 million on a wind farm on the island, maybe we should just pause for 10 seconds and just think what is going on in the two largest blocks in the world in terms of potential reversal in all of these policies.
All right, Julian, lovely to talk to you as ever. Thank you very much indeed for phoning. A lot of ground covered there. Some text now. This is G, who says tax was raised 2% to support Manx Care. How much will the doctor's pay rise cost? Another 2% tax increase, asks G. I was told by a South African resident that he and his family of 4 came here because instead of going to the UK wanted £1,000 per person for the NHS, but the Isle of Man asked for nothing. Those were his words, not mine. That's something we'd have to get verified. Thank you for texting. Steve says, what about charging people for missing doctor's appointments? I was in the chemist last week waiting for a prescription, which I paid for. While I was waiting, loads of people getting their prescriptions for no payment. And let's say some of the surnames I didn't recognise. So who is paying for their prescriptions? We got Manx Telecom saying they want to get everyone to go on fibre and get rid of copper. Then they want customers to pay for the privilege of getting it fitted if a duct is needed to get into the property, says Mike. Text ending 223 says, sorry to listen to Jill having to go off island for that injection. That must be awful. I've been waiting, says texter 508, for 3 years to see someone about an ongoing shoulder problem which is causing me pain on a daily basis. I've seen 3 doctors over the past 3 years. I've had 3 rescheduled appointments at the hospital and I'm still waiting. What could possibly, this texter asked, take 3 years to organise? And the doctors think they're hard done by. What is going on? Manx Care. Adair says the way to stop wasting so much money is to pay doctors is to stop the doctors prescribing so many drugs. How many people get prescriptions and only use half or less? Besides, doctors should be telling people how to live healthier. But yeah, does the public really want to hear those messages? Bonzo says it's not that there isn't the money, it's because the Isle of Man government refuses to raise the money, tax those with the broadest shoulders fairly and end the stupidity of the welfare state. Text running 723 says, I think government should pay the doctors the best deal to attract the very best care for us all, rather than second-rate doctors. We could possibly have the money through gas if this government could somehow find it in the Irish Sea. We could even make money by having people coming over here for healthcare. Please aim high and look after us all with health, education and food security. Text ending 123 says it may seem straightforward regarding Jill's call and the same thing or drug, but the reality is some things aren't as straightforward. For example, if you had to have your eye injection on the Isle of Man and got edema that didn't resolve, is there honestly the expertise to deal with that problem? Maybe the person goes blind because immediate treatment can't be undertaken over here. Maybe due to air pressures in a plane they can't be flown either. Personally, says this texter, I would rather sit in Liverpool all day for expertise and safety when it goes wrong. I have been one of those people having to travel on my own for treatment and with elderly parents. This texter 708 says, just to clarify, this new shelter on South Beach in Ramsey is for the whole community to enjoy the whole year round. It's not just for the swimmers. This texter is a sea swimmer. But yeah, of course, that's what it was. The video that we had on yesterday, Howard, was showing the sea swimmers using it to get changed in. But of course, it is a place that you'll be able to sit all year round. Some messages in on WhatsApp.
Yes, there are a couple coming in on that as well. And nobody was disputing, says Steve, that expat is a valid term. The issue was that he seemed perfectly OK with British expats in the other countries, but doesn't seem to like African immigrants. And he's once again decided to avoid answering what that is, says Steve. And texter ending, in fact, it's Eugene. Eugene says, yes, I think Julian needs to get out more and switch off the computer. He must spend most of the day on the internet. Well, I think he's no crime in that, of course, Eugene, but if that's what Julian wants to do. But yes, I see where you're coming from on that one.
Another text here from number ending 778 that says, I've been going over to Aintree University Hospital for eye injections for 2 years. And as your contributor said, it's a really long day, leaving at 7 a.m. and returning at 7:15 p.m. I've inquired why the injection can't be done in Nobles, and it's because my injection, and there are different ones, can't be done here as there's nobody qualified to do it. The injection is very expensive as well. By the way, this texter says the treatment at Aintree is superb. An expat is an emigrant or immigrant, usually with legal status, says texter ending 475. I wonder what would happen if we started to describe legal immigrants to the island, such as care workers, as expats. Can any of your wise contributors give us an answer to this one, asks Pat. The DHSS funds are depleted. Many people are complaining about the living wage being increased and that would bring in a bit more in NI contributions. Now, if people don't want to pay NI, how do we expect healthcare and pensions to be funded? We all have to accept the difficult decisions to raise more NI. If we don't, we're in a mess. More people will die, more people will be pulling their own teeth out, and pensioners left to freeze and starve. What is the answer? And I won't accept reducing civil servant or welfare is the answer. Let us have your knowledgeable people give us the fix, asks Pat. Text running 653 says, in response to Julian, the point I was making was that immigrants to the UK are called immigrants, but those emigrating are classed as expats. It's classist, nothing more, nothing less. Thank you very much indeed for coming back. Ian, can you explain why Mannin Line got rid of the pre-programmed disclaimer, no comments of a derogatory or defamatory nature? Was this disclaimer removed so that Mannin Line now decides what is defamatory? I don't need Mannin Line to decide it for me. I believe some of the people in power are clowns and hell-bent on making our island just like another city of the northwest of the UK. Have a nice day, says Ian. And I agree with Julian, says another Ian. We shouldn't be rushing into net zero policies in light of those moves in Germany. The government here should get real and face up to the fact that a lot of Manx residents are not in favour of net zero policies. 166 177 studio at manxradio.com. Still, though, quarter of an hour or so if you'd like to go on air. And Mark has given us a call on 66 13 68. Good afternoon, Mark.
Yeah, hi Beth. Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on the medical staff pay rises. Now, I think it's important to note that medical staff, frontline workers, are very sought after globally. So, and I'm not saying we should pay them fully what they are asking for, but a lot of our medical staff, I presume, are probably not from the Isle of Man. They could relocate back to the UK. And the UK is actually struggling as well. A lot of the UK doctors and nurses are going to Australia where they're earning more money as well. So that's one issue that needs to be taken into account. But what the government are not doing is they're not actually tackling let's call them the general civil service, the non-frontline workers. I'm just waiting in the car at the moment. I did a Google search, and this information doesn't seem to be freely available. But the civil service, not including fire staff, nurses and doctors, has increased by about 500 people in the last 10 years. So, and that's Google, so it could be wrong. I'd love someone from government to come in and correct me. So that's about £20 million. So the government is also preaching AI. Companies should use AI. But what is the government actually doing to adopt AI? So I think what they need to do is to actually say, one, we've got a roadmap to reduce our headcount, and how we're going to do that using AI, because generally most companies will say you can reduce administrative positions by about 25%. That money could then go to the front line. That's on the cost base, but on the revenue side, what is the government doing to attract more revenue to the Treasury? Nothing. And your previous texter said about Kroger gas. There hasn't been a single MHK, I think, apart from the former Manx Radio journalist who's now an MHK, who've actually been very proactive about Kroger. That won't cost the Isle of Man a single cent, but there could be, I think the windfall is about £2.5 billion. So, what are the MHKs doing? They're not trying to reduce costs, and they're not trying to attract revenue. And it's not simple, but they just seem to be talking about sort of peripheral issues and not tackling, the big sort of ticket items. And, listen, so I'm waffling now, and I apologise, but on your show yesterday, people were talking about, voting for MHKs and, whether you should have an island-wide sort of system whereby you can vote for MHKs who are tackling fundamental issues and not sort of, dog poo on the pavement. And I think I just really encourage people in the next general election to really focus on the big issues, because the big issues affect everyone. I've waffled there, Beth, and I apologise. No,
it's great. I really appreciate your call, Mark. I mean, the only thing is we talk a lot, don't we, about these sort of catch-22. So I take your point about reducing maybe the civil service headcount by 25%. But then what happens to those 25%? Where do they go? Some of them end up needing support.
It's a roadmap, Beth. It doesn't have to be, we're a community. We're not going to sack everybody. You just say, OK, in the next 10 years, these are the amounts of people that are retiring. And these positions can be replaced by AI. It doesn't have to be a big bang system. No one wants to sack people. But the government have failed to create that roadmap. And most governments around, you can see what's happening in America. I mean, all the civil service have got bloated, and in the UK they call them a blob, and it's just a lack of business-minded people. And I think the chief minister failed when he, and this is I'm not sort of I've never met the individual, but rather than appointing somebody from the private sector. Our CEO of the Isle of Man Civil Service is actually from the civil service in the UK, and it's a different mindset. And you need to change the mindset, and until you do that, nothing's going to change. So I think that's the key issue. Reduce costs gradually, create a roadmap. I think people in the Isle of Man are calling out. Just give us a roadmap. What are you going to do to reduce the cost? Because at the moment, it's just silence. And none of the MHKs are talking about it. And, the fact that they're not, really sort of, getting behind Kroger 100% is mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. Because we know that, yes, the global warming is real, but most of the not global warming, climate change has been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and yes, it has been linked in the last 100 years to mankind's production of carbon, but the carbon production's been outsourced. It's not just oil and gas. I mean, look at cement manufacturing. Cement manufacturing is a high carbon intensive process. That has been outsourced from the UK to Africa now. Now, do we still need cement? Yes. Are we still going to use cement? Yes. But it's now being manufactured in Africa and shipped in. Is that environmentally friendly, or is that just ticking a box?
I should probably...
To the UK. Sorry,
I was only going to say, Mark, just because we've mentioned Kroger quite a lot, I should probably ask you at this point if you've got any connection to Kroger.
I want to invest in Kroger. I was really disappointed when I think they issued the share, the share round to the general public, and I actually invested then, and I got my money returned. So I'm really hoping that it happens. I'm very doubtful about it now because it's all gone very quiet. But yes, I would definitely invest in Kroger if they were to do another round of, another round to the general public, quite happily.
All right, Mark, thank you very much for taking the time to call. Great to talk to you.
All right, take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care. That was Mark covering some of the issues, particularly around frontline workers there. Regarding eye injections, says text ending 038, the simplest solution would be to enable a consultant and nurse from Liverpool to fly here every week and hold a clinic at Nobles. This would save all the patient travel costs, flights, taxis, plus companion costs, which could pay for the service and stop time being wasted by patients. Elderly patients struggled getting up at 5 a.m. to catch a plane and then might not be back until after 9 p.m. So I have forwarded the question to Manx Care to ask about this. I imagine it's going to be a clinical response and whether it needs to be done in a setting where potentially, if there are any problems, there is more medical staff and medical equipment to deal with it, but I don't know the answer to that yet. Andy wants to know how much the Isle of Man government paid Manx Telecom to connect everybody with fibre broadband. I'd have to find out those figures for you, Andy. What percentage of the island is now foreign? Just wondering. This is from a German, says this texter. In England, doctors were striking, holding placards showing £14 an hour. People supported them. Here, the pay can be quartered to $500,000, not an hour, presumably. In addition, the tax paid only 22% instead of 45%. That is a text in there. My granddaughter needs some treatment at Nobles, and we've been told there's a 6-year waiting list, so having to pay privately and getting seen in 2 weeks. It's costing us, says texter ending 951, over £1,000. Tim Ward are just about to vote to throw a minimum wage increase of 14% for unskilled 18-year-olds on the island. All small businesses will be legislated against to pay this. So how can they argue about this request from such important doctors over here? We have recently helped some health workers relocate back to the UK. They've told us, says this texter, that it's not the level of pay, but it's the cost of living over here, especially decent, affordable homes. And that is the main factor for them returning to the UK. Another issue was a lack of activities or venues to visit during their off time. I guess this answer to this caller, please ask how much taxpayers' money has already been spent on the Kroger proposal. Manx Sue wants to know, indeed, also the external consultants for the turbines as well. A couple of minutes before the end of the show, let's go to the line and join Vivian. Good afternoon, Vivian.
Good afternoon. I've only just come in, so I'm sorry I haven't been here for your whole programme.
That's okay. We'll let you off.
That's all right. I had all these eye injections. I started off going to Aintree, but then I had it all done at Nobles because the consultants used to come over on a Friday.
So that must have made life a lot easier, Vivian. We know how difficult it is.
Easier.
Yeah.
And there was an awful lot of people at the clinic, but it was very, very successful. I don't know what's happened recently, but I had cataracts and I had macula. That's why I had the injections. But I was well looked after at Nobles and at Aintree.
Well, that's lovely to hear, and it must be so much easier when you don't have to travel so far. But we are, as I say, we have put that question into Manx Care. We expect it is going to be a clinical response, and maybe certain conditions do need to have a little bit of extra care around them just in case. But hopefully, is it all a little bit settled now for you?
Oh, I'm all right, yes. I mean, I haven't got the best of eyesight, but I've had all these things done, and everybody looked after me. And that's all there is to it.
Oh, well, that's lovely to hear, Vivian. Thank you so much for letting us know.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. That was Vivian just talking in response to Jill's call a little bit earlier. Manx Telecom fibre rollout is a bit of a joke. It should be underground. I don't want to see a big pole when I open my curtains in the morning. Maybe our MHKs are waiting for an invite to join the board of Kroger, says texter ending 762. I think that's possibly unfair. Over 50% of the island is foreign, says Mark. I suppose we have to qualify what we're talking about there. When you're thinking about people coming to the Isle of Man, this is something that's happened for many, many years, Howard.
Yes, it is. And just a quick one on this, Beth. One from Colin in the States saying, "Hi, Beth. Before moving to America, I used to have to go to Walton Hospital for treatment, injections for Bell's palsy. The consultant told me he couldn't get authorisation to do injections on the Isle of Man from the government. Myself and several other people were flown out to Liverpool, taxied to Walton, flown back to the island. This made for a very long day out for a consultation, typically under 15 minutes. The consultant who did the injections was on the island, paid for by the Department of Health every month for 2 days for this consultations clinic." Does seem slightly odd, doesn't it? You just think there would be or should be an easier way around this.
Well, we have put the question into Manx Care. As I say, we do expect it's going to be a clinical response, and obviously everybody's case is completely different. And I think the main thing to say is if anybody would like to discuss treatment, you can call MCALS or speak to your doctor. That is pretty much all for today's programme. We've got a load of texts and emails actually that have just come in, so I'm going to read through all of them. If there are any need reading out tomorrow, I will do that during tomorrow's programme. Christy D is up next with 1 to 3. As ever, if you think of something to say when we're not on air, you can call our out of hours number. That's 682 631. Particularly if you've got a question or something you'd like us to ask about, that's quite a good way of doing that. Say Christy next, then it's Alex in the afternoon, and I'll be back with you with update from 5 p.m. So whatever you're doing this afternoon, have a good one, and I'll talk to you again later.